Sorry for the short delay in starting. We were waiting for the African Union Commissioner, Mr. Vilakati. He is expected to join. My name is Ramesh Subramaniam. I am the Global Director for Programs and Strategy at the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. This session is dedicated to Africa. As you see on the wall here, we have 51 member countries in CDRI as well as 11 partner organizations. We have 9 countries from Africa, many represented here, as well as the African Union Commission and the ECOWAS Economic Commission of West African States are members of CDRI. When we talk about Africa, lots of things come to all our minds. It's a huge continent with immense potential, lots of opportunities, but also significant challenges. 70% of the infrastructure in the continent needs to be built. Lots of urban populations are growing, which pose lots of opportunities, lots of challenges, but also immense opportunities. So with that infrastructure needs, there is also great opportunity to make that infrastructure resilient. In recent assessments done by CDRI, globally while there are significant infrastructure investment requirements, we also face a challenge. Every year, the world loses about $800 billion to losses due to natural disasters, and out of that, 400 billion is in developing countries, low-income, lower middle-income countries. In a study that we launched a couple of months back, focused on Africa, we estimated that Africa, on an average basis, every year loses about $13 billion to disasters, in addition to the large unmet investment requirements. So that's the context setting for the conversation today. We have a fantastic panel of some very senior people. I'll introduce them for the audience. We also hope there'll be more people joining. Immensely delighted to have Mr. Ajay Bhushan Pandey. He is the Vice President of Investment Solutions from the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. He provides leadership overall, and he oversees 3 key departments. These are the Sectors, Themes, and Finance Solutions Department, or STF, the Sustainability and Fiduciary Solutions Department, and the Portfolio Management Department. Before he joined AIIB in April 2025, he served in prominent leadership positions within the Government of India for over 30 years, where he played a pivotal role in shaping India's digital and financial infrastructure through various initiatives, including the Aadhaar, which is globally talked about. So we're delighted to have you. We have Martin Schuller, who is in the London. Excellency, thank you so much. Please. This is a cinema hall, so you'll be able to hear only if you have the... So delighted to have now His Excellency Mr. Moses Vilakati join us. He's the Commissioner for ARB at the AUC, previously served as Minister in Eswatini in both the Ministry of Tourism and Environmental Affairs, and prior to that he was Minister for Agriculture. He has a lot of experience in a number of infrastructure sectors, so he'll be giving keynote remarks. Let me just introduce, I started talking about Martin. Martin Schuller is from Arup. He is the London water leader. Arup is a global design and engineering consultancy. They work in a number of countries, including in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and so on. Michelle Otter Mills. She is the Deputy CEO of the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. She's a chartered accountant with significant experience. She's joined GIIF recently, and delighted that we have it's GIIF is a unique fund. It's a national DFI operating in Ghana, so we look forward to hearing from you. And Mr. Kennedy Mateka is the Deputy Director, Buildings, of Building Safety and Climate Resilience at the Ministry of Lands, Public Works and Urban Development in Kenya. Delighted to have you, Kennedy. And last but not the least, Mr. Kinapara Koulibaly, who is the Chief Executive Officer of BNETED, which is the Bureau National Studies and Techniques and Development, a leading engineering consultancy in Côte d'Ivoire. It's a unique entity in that they offer overall solutions across the entire project cycle. So we'll be eager to actually, in fact, hear from you. We are also waiting for the Vice President for Strategy from the OPEC Fund, Masab Alomar. When he comes, I will introduce him to you. So without further ado, I'm going to request Commissioner Vilakati to give keynote remarks. We, African Union Commission, as I mentioned, Commissioner, before you came, is a partner, a strong partner for CDRI. So we'll be eager to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. It's an honor for me to be part of this gathering today. We have had, can I say, a long journey with CTR, so I'm pleased to be... Oh, that's better. Is that better? Yeah, we've had a long journey with CTR, and so I'm pleased to be part of these discussions. On behalf of the African Union Commission, I would like to express my deep gratitude and appreciation to our host, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, CDRI, for convening this session, which is themed from risks to returns, financial resilient infrastructure in Africa, as a platform to discuss the risk-return trade-off. The topic is particularly relevant, especially in the current context of Africa's steady implementation of Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want. Indeed, most African countries have faced a significant infrastructure deficit, exacerbated by rapid unplanned urbanization and underinvestment in people, underinvestment in infrastructure, and underinvestment in productivity. The continent currently invests only 4% of its GDP in infrastructure, compared to over 14% in other parts of the world. The reality is that the pace of Africa's infrastructure development has not kept pace with the growing needs of its population. Allow me to briefly highlight the infrastructure landscape across key sectors in Africa. First, our road networks, which are vital for regional integration and trade, continue to face challenges of limited coverage and maintenance. In contrast, recent decades have seen notable progress in port development, supported by substantial international investment that is helping Africa to modernize its maritime gateways. Meanwhile, our railway systems, though historically significant, would benefit from renewed attention, as many lines require upgrades to fully meet today's transport and economic needs. Strengthening these critical systems will be essential for unlocking continental full potential for growth and competitiveness. Just last month, we had a summit looking at critical infrastructure, particularly in the railway space. It only covers from Lobito to Zambia, but there's also a proposed extension from Zambia to Tanzania, which will at least now cover most of the states in Africa. But this is not enough. The reality calls for a renewed approach, one that ensures infrastructure becomes a driver of economic transformation as well as resilience. With the 70% of Africa's future infrastructure yet to be built, the continent has a unique opportunity to shape a new development model for the global south. So as we discuss CTR's proposed resilience infrastructure, Resilient Africa program, we must ensure that our focus goes beyond outlining challenges to inspire a unified, vigorous response to the monumental task that lies ahead. Reducing damage to critical infrastructure and basic services is also a key target of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, in line with the 2030 agenda. So SDG 9 requires that by 2030, infrastructure is developed and upgraded in a way that renders it reliable, sustainable, and resilient. Additionally, the Paris Agreement and the new urban agenda also recognizes the role of infrastructure in securing safe, resilient, and sustainable living environment. As the African Union, we remain firmly committed to ensuring that this is done to sustain Africa, because without infrastructure, we cannot develop. Without infrastructure, we cannot be able to link from one country to another, from one continent to the next. Our approach to resilience is driven by the reality that climate and hazard-related impacts are becoming more frequent and severe in Africa, and that the cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of preparing. So we now need to act. Resilient infrastructure investments also mitigate not only the large-scale disaster impacts, but also the impacts of frequent smaller shocks, such as seasonal flooding and heat waves, and allow AU member states to reap the dividends of their investments through stable economies and livelihoods. Let me conclude by emphasizing the value of exploring together different mechanisms that will support and sustain the investments needed, including innovative financing approach, insurance and risk transfer, investing in building resilience in Africa, which is also very critical and urgent. And the AUC is committed to supporting its member states to accelerate this ambition and outcomes. I forgot the issue of air links, the linkages from country to country in Africa, which is a vital infrastructure. It's easier for you to fly to Barcelona than flying just from one country to another, which are neighborhoods. So I think we've got a serious task ahead of us to make sure that Africa can be linked from one country to the next, from continent to continent. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Vilakati, always for very insightful remarks, laying out the challenges as well as opportunities. The point that you made on cost of inaction is likely to be significantly larger than cost of action or cost of investments. Very true. Just to echo, in work CDRI will be launching next week, where you've been very closely guiding us, very clear evidence that investing $1 in resilience gives returns as high as $7 to $12. Earlier it used to be 1 to 4, then it became 1 to 5. Now clearly we have evidence building up showing that there will be significant returns. Musab, I had introduced you before you came, but delighted to have you. Musab Alamad as the Vice President for Strategy at OPEC Fund, which is doing a lot of very interesting work across the world, including in Africa as well as in this part of the world, in Latin America and small island developing states. And Sakshi Dasgupta, who is here, she is the Africa program leader at the CDRI. I will invite her at the end to share some thoughts on our Africa program. So I'm going to request now VP Ponde of AIIB. What we will do is we'll alternate between sort of global financiers and getting national perspectives. Commissioner Vilakati has laid out from the continent's perspective, from AUC's perspective, what are the issues and opportunities across the continent, and then we will hear from colleagues who are representing their countries But before that, let me go to VP Pandey. Sir, if you can, AIIB, it's about 10 years old, but you've grown remarkably with over 110 countries, members, including several of them from Africa. How is AIIB particularly evolving your approach to integrating resilience in infrastructure operations? And if you could also highlight institutions like CDRI, we are kind of sitting at the interface between countries and IFIs. How can we have strong partnership? Over to you.
Thank you, Ramesh. First of all, I am extremely thankful for this invitation and representing AIIB in this forum. The question that you have asked is that how does AIIB deal with this resilience, particularly relating to the disaster? As you have said that, we are about 9 years old bank. And in this 9 years, we have executed almost more than 330 projects in more than 39 countries. And then the total project value is about more than 62 billion US dollars. And we are an infrastructure bank. And not only the infrastructure, let me take you back to our basic fundamental, the Articles of Association. Our Articles of Association says, the very first article says that AIIB will invest in the sustainable infrastructure. Also, the Articles of Association says that all environment and social standards will be followed. Now, what does it mean for us? That whenever any project comes for discussion and evaluation, in our entire working, this disaster resilience is the key element. We examine the project in a great detail as to whether, the drought, flood, cyclone, and, the various other earthquake, many of those disasters that keep happening, in some part of the world or the other. And whenever such disaster happens, you will also see the explanation coming from the people and the authority that this is the disaster once in a 30 years or 40 years. And this is how, they try to explain that why, they couldn't do anything because, it was 30, 40 years old. But the question is that the infrastructure that we are going to develop today, should we not take care of those aspects? And that is what, within the AIIB, I must assure you, that every project, not in a project, of certain types, every project, unless and until they are examined, they are assessed, then only it moves to the next stage. So therefore, this resilience and disaster resilience is not a cost to us. Actually, it is a foundation for our banking assessment. This is what we do, and that is why, because we also have certain credibility attached to this. Just imagine that we finance a particular bridge or highway or any other project, and that gets washed away. I mean, imagine the kind of reputation damage that we will suffer. So we don't want to do that, and therefore all these structures that have been built, not just for the purpose that it is nice to have the disaster resilience, but this is an essential requirement. And I think this is what I would like to assure you. I am very glad that we are talking about the Africa. We have even though we are Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, we have 110 countries as the shareholder, but we have a large number of African countries. They are our shareholders. In fact, in this panel, there are 3 countries represented: the Ghana, Kenya, and Cote d'Ivoire, and all those 3 countries are members of AIIB. So I think this is and AIIB, as I said, even though it is a regional Asia-focused bank, but we have a significant investment in Africa. We have more than 15 projects approved in Africa, amounting to about 2.8 billion US dollars. So this is what we do. And then the second question that you asked was that what role an institution like CDRI can play. Actually, the CDRI can play a very important role, because you are the what we say that you are the architect of resilience, disaster resilience. You are in touch with the government, you are in touch with the local people there, and you are the messenger for the disaster resilience. So I would term you as an architect of the resilience infrastructure, and then the governments, like I can see the many representatives of the government or those who deal with the governments are the implementers. So that's the second piece. And then the third piece is the financier, like in the OPEC fund or the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. So we are the three. I think all three of us have to come together. And if we come together, and I'm very hopeful that this disaster resilience could be built in every project that we execute. And then the massive loss that you mentioned about $800 billion loss occurring every year. I mean, this is something as a world we cannot afford. And this is something, this is something which is solvable. As I have said before, that disaster resilience is not a cost. Actually, this is a smart way of doing project. Just think that if you are constructing your own house, would you not take care that, your house should be earthquake resistant, right? I mean, this is I feel is not only a question of any theoretical discussion, but it is a strong common sense and also the financial sense, commercial sense. And this is exactly what we try to promote in the AIIB. Another point that I would like to mention, that the sustainability and then the resilience is in the genes of AIIB. Because we cannot move anything, we can't do anything which is not resilient, which is not sustainable, and because we cannot take as I mentioned, our articles of agreement, they don't allow that. When we raise money from the market, how do we fund the project? We don't get grants from the governments. We actually raise money from the market. And every bond that we issue, it is sustainable bond. If our investors don't have a trust, then they will not invest. But then we are able to raise, almost about $10 billion from the bond market as a resilient, the sustainable bond. And every time that we go, our bond gets oversubscribed 3 or 4 times. It means that the investors have trust that our actions, our projects will be resilient, and that is why they invest money in our bonds. And that is how we can take forward. So as I mentioned, I can see the 3 players: the CDRI as the architect of the resilience, the government as the implementer, and then the financiers like the OPEC fund or the AIIB as the financier. If we 3 can come together and if we can work together, I think we can solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pandey. Greatly appreciate. Before I pass on the mic to Mr. Koulibaly to get his perspectives from Cote d'Ivoire, given your previous role running one of the largest digital programs or innovative programs in the world, digital solutions obviously play a big role in boosting resilience, be at the individual level in terms of what happens post-disasters, but even before in terms of having data. Africa obviously needs to build its digital infrastructure. So any brief thoughts?
Yeah, I think you have raised very important question. Sometimes people have this impression that when we talk about the disaster resilient infrastructure, it's some physical infrastructure that we talk about. That it should be a bridge or the highway or the port or some kind of the physical infrastructure. But I think the digital infrastructure is the very, very key infrastructure. I'll give you an example. During COVID, at that time I was the finance secretary, and the COVID, there was complete lockdown in the entire country. I think each one of you must have faced that situation in your country. How do you reach your people, and how do you assist your people if you want to? And during the COVID, because India had a digital infrastructure, the entire 1.3 billion population then had a digital identity, and then the digital payment was built over this. So the government could send money by a press of a button to 330 million families, 330 million families, almost entire population. Each family could be sent money. And in fact, there was a very interesting article in Economist at that time, because that time, the US government, was also trying to assist its citizen. So they actually sent a check by post, but then the postal system was also not working, and therefore they couldn't get the money. And here, whereas in India, the people got money instantly into their bank account, but in order to withdraw cash, they did not have to go to the ATM machine because they couldn't have gone there or to the bank. Actually, what they could do is that the local kirana shop, the local grocery store, they could just, make a phone call and order and then make payment digitally, and then the things could get delivered locally. So I think, that time people could realize that what kind of a resilience the digital infrastructure can bring in. So I think, in Africa, this, if you want to do something, because this digital infrastructure cuts across all sectors. If it is a health, education, or any other infrastructure that we are talking about, you must build this digital public infrastructure, starting from the digital ID, have a layer of the digital payment, and then another layer over layer. And I think if you can build this digital public infrastructure, that will be useful for all other infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Pandey. Let me go to Mr. Kinapara Koulibaly, who's the CEO of Binited in the Côte d'Ivoire. So you're a unique institution. You're at the what I would call as the intersection of public policy, technical delivery, and development finance. So from your perspective, what does it take today for an African country to turn resilience from just an aspiration or from a policy ambition into a pipeline of credible projects, bankable projects? Resilience can boost bankability, but it is challenging. Many of the IFIs, DFIs face this challenge. So thoughts from you, Mr. Koulibaly.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. And thank you for inviting BNET, so the National Bureau for Technical Studies and Development from Côte d'Ivoire. So thank you for having us in this important conversation. So yes, we do need more climate resilience, more resilient infrastructure in Côte d'Ivoire and in Africa, I would say, more generally. So you already mentioned why is it important? Because today studies have shown that 10 to 20% of African GDP is at risk because of climate change. And you mentioned also earlier that investing $1 in a resilient infrastructure can avoid. So I was still at the $4 avoided loss, but I take your point that you were saying now it's more $7 to $12 avoided loss when you invest $1 in resilient infrastructure. So yes, it's really important for us to have a resilient infrastructure. But what we see today is that in Africa, we do not have enough of this type of infrastructure. So why? So maybe let me tell you a little bit more about BNET, about the National Office for Technical Studies and Development in Côte d'Ivoire. So BNET is a state-owned company. We are an engineering services company with a revenue of around $100 million per year. BNET is 50 years old, and we have around 1,500 employees, so mainly engineers and technical experts that are working on different domains of infrastructure. Environment, roads, building, agriculture, digital infrastructure, and so on. So from our perspective, what we are seeing today is that, so yes, we do not have enough of resilient infrastructure, but why? For the past months, we had several discussions with a lot of development partners. And what we noticed, and everybody agreed on that, is that there is no lack of financing available to build this resilient infrastructure. Financing exists, But the problem is the lack of preparation. And I would say the lack of preparation in two aspects. So the first aspect will be the technical preparation, and the second aspect will be the financial preparation. So in Bennett, for instance, so what we see, so we can provide technical expertise. We can provide the technical studies when the government want to do a project. So in Côte d'Ivoire, Bennett is the main technical advisor to the government of Côte d'Ivoire. But we are not only working for Côte d'Ivoire, we are also working in West and Central Africa. I mean, we have projects in Côte d'Ivoire, in Benin, and in Coco. But what we notice is that beside the technical preparation, we noticed that there was also a lack of financial preparation for the different projects. Financial preparation meaning what are the expectations of the financing partner that could finance this or that project. And that is why NET has been more and more working with DFIs, working with development partners in order to make sure that we could identify what was the gap between the expectation for the financing partner and the project, and making sure that we can come back with an optimized project that meets the financing criteria by these different financing partners. On the technical side, I would say that we need to have more resilient infrastructure, and this is why it is important for us to be able to collaborate with institutions like DRI, so that we can make sure that we can move from building conventional infrastructure to climate resilient infrastructure. And this collaboration is really key. So moving forward, from my point of view, we need to have these two levels. So the first level is collaboration in order to make sure that the different projects meet the criteria, the expectation by the financial partners, and collaboration with technical partners, with institutions like DRI, to make sure that we also have climate resilient infrastructure that are built and that could help to build a better future for Africa.
Great, thanks so much, Mr. Coulibaly, for those perspectives. We are looking forward to working very closely with Benetet. I'm now going to go to a global financier, to this side, to OPEC Fund. So Musab, thank you for joining us. Yesterday, in fact, Luis Hela, myself, some of the others, we were at an NDB organized panel on adaptation finance. So from OPEC Fund's perspective, Musab, if you can share with us, how is OPEC Fund? You've been doing a lot of very interesting work across the world, particularly in terms of, resilience. We all talk about it, but it is challenging. We all multilateral institutions have goals, but in terms of achieving those targets, it's not been easy. Mitigation comes more easily. So in this context, and when we look at resilience dividend, what do we make of it, and what are some of the practical steps that OPEC Fund has put in place for integrating resilience into projects, Musab?
Thank you very much, Ramesh, and a very good afternoon to you all. It's great to be here alongside partner countries and partner institutions. As you mentioned, Ramesh, in the introduction, we work across 125 countries, and 40% of our operation is in Africa, in fact. So you can imagine the different climate issues we face in different continents. So for us, from the OPEC Fund perspective, embedding resilience into regional and continental programs is a smart economic. It protects investments, reduces risks, and drives long-term inclusive growth. So for example, Africa is building fast, but it is also losing billions every year because of floods, droughts, and other climate shocks. So the real question isn't should we build resilience, it is can we afford not so. That's why resilience has become a core investment principle for us at the OPEC Fund. After adopting our climate action plan, we introduced two frameworks that makes resilience part of everything we do. The first one is our climate impact operational framework, and the second one is our Paris alignment guidelines. Both, they ensure that the projects are screened for climate and disaster risks and assessed for alignment with Paris Agreement. This means resilience now built in from the start, not added at a later stage. So every road, power line, or irrigation system we finance is designed to withstand future shocks. And the payoff is real, as you mentioned, what we call the resilience dividend. So when you embed resilience, you get 3 returns for every dollar. Assets last longer and perform better. People benefit more through jobs, access, and stability. Investors gain confidence, seeing lower risk and steadier return. And then you see the private sector is there because of that. In Africa, we're building this into practice. We see it through projects in Lesotho, Tanzania, Malawi, and Burundi, and other countries. We see how climate-smart roads, irrigation, and value chains can protect livelihoods and open markets, and how we are scaling that, and now we are scaling that impact through regional initiatives. So we have our Green Blue initiative, we have the Nature Solution Finance Hub with the Asian Development Bank, and our South-South Knowledge Hub, which brings together adaptation, mitigation, and innovation across countries and help preparing a solid pipeline and projects. So for us, embedding resilience is about turning risks into returns, protecting infrastructure today while creating the foundation for more inclusive, sustainable, and investable Africa, as mentioned by Ajay. So basically, resilience for us underpins sustainability by enabling system to withstand and adapt to change.
Great, thank you so much, Musab. Before I pass the mic to Kennedy, OPEC fund like AIIB, you provide sovereign as well as private sector solutions. So could you briefly talk about what are you on with regard to particularly resilience? Is your private sector operations following the same approach, or they, because mobilizing private capital is going to be very, very critical for Africa?
Indeed. No, thank you, Ramesh. What I talked about earlier, the assessment tools that we have, they apply for both sovereign and non-sovereign. So for us, we make sure that first, every project undergoes a climate risk and vulnerability screening at the design stage, both sovereign and non-sovereign. Second, we apply climate resilient design standards, basically, and track adaptation, co-benefits, quantifying the share of financing that direct support resilience outcomes. Third, through our development effectiveness framework, we assess results, not just what is built, but how is it performed under stress. And especially for the private sector, we assess the additionality that we bring into that private sector. So finally, we capture the share lessons through our systematic reporting under the development effectiveness and climate finance report, creating a feedback loop that strengthens our future investments.
Thanks so much for those perspectives, Musab. Greatly appreciate. Let me go to Kennedy now for Kenya's perspectives. Particularly, how is Kenya integrating disaster risk assessments into your national construction codes, particularly, as well as infrastructure planning? Because resilience cannot be an afterthought. It's got to be starting from the beginning, and you've got to integrate into every aspect of the project cycle. So it'll be very helpful for us to hear Kenya's perspectives. Over to you, Kennedy.
Thank you. Before I start, I think it's important to understand that, and this is just in Kenya, and I believe the rest of our countries in Africa are doing the same, that infrastructure sectors among the government's sectors enjoy the highest level of government support in terms of funding for development. And therefore, as we now tap into other forms of alternative funding for infrastructure, that effort of various governments, especially in Africa, is something that needs to be scaled up and see how then we should support the initiative around that. But more importantly for us is to understand that we have, as countries, submitted our nationally determined contributions. These are key global initiatives that allows most governments to get or to really commit under the Paris Agreement what they need to do in terms of realization of their climate goals. If you go to NDCs across African countries, there's a lot of prominence of climate vulnerability risk assessments. That is an opportunity that has not been fully exploited, and I'm making this case in point in Kenya, and that creates another level of opportunity to see that we have vulnerability risk assessments as per the NDCs that most African countries did submit, then be looked into and be supported in that context. But more importantly also at a Kenyan level, we have various legal and institutional frameworks that support resilience infrastructure development. Whether these are road manuals, whether this is the new building code that we have in the country to ensure that we have enhanced resilience of our infrastructure, whether they are buildings, whether they are public facilities and amenities, and therefore the strengthening of our national building codes with a view of realizing and achieving more resilient infrastructure is a key component. In Kenya, we are barely 6 months down into the implementation of the new building code, and that creates an extra opportunity, not just for us as a country, but also a framework for collaboration and partnership. We have a key legal instrument that requires that every project must undergo impact assessments. That provision within project financing is a key component to ensure that all risks that relates to projects, especially in the infrastructure component, are looked into in detail, and not necessarily that all projects that have funding then must be implemented. So that provision under AIE implementation matrix within our project cycle is very important. We have also strengthened our PPP framework to ensure that public-private partnerships then comes handy to support alternative funding. In the framework itself, there is a key requirement to ensure that we enhance resilience of the very infrastructure that we are developing. And therefore, we are strengthening this process bit and day by day, but we believe there is more that we can really do together as a team. We have two institutions that are very key in terms of support to the resilience of our infrastructure. We have National Disaster Risk Operations Center, which covers issues of disaster across the various sectors. But within our infrastructure sector, we have a multi-sectoral advisory committee that is chaired by our minister, who is here with us in this forum. It's a team that really covers on all issues of disaster that arises in the infrastructure sector. And therefore, that creates an opportunity for working together to see how then we should realize moving forward more enhanced and resilient infrastructure in Kenya. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kennedy. Before I invite Michelle, your ministry covers 4 heavy-duty sectors. Housing is pretty complex. Particularly, we were chatting earlier, enforcement of resilience standards, codes, and so on is immensely complicated. Any quick thoughts on that, how your ministry is dealing with this?
It is true that implementation and enforcement of the building codes are not just codes in the building sector, but in most of our infrastructure sector projects is an issue. I want to echo what my previous speaker said on issue of digital infrastructure. In fact, we are coming up with an e-buildings approval and management system. That kind of a system, being a digital infrastructure to support the housing agenda, to support public works program, to support other forms of infrastructure development, will ensure that all possible laws, policies, and regulations existing then are part of the system. And when you want to realize the percentage compliance of a given project, you will actually subject the project details in a given card format into that system, and the system will auto-detect. This is where we are talking about technology integration, AI, and blockchains, and everything else. So it's a whole system that we are developing to ensure that we have the laws that are in place, we have the regulations that are in place, be applied, especially in project feasibilities, project design, and even at project implementation phase. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Kennedy. Let me now invite Michelle Mills, who is the Deputy CEO of the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. Michelle, thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to working with GIIF at CDRI. As the nation's infrastructure fund, could you talk about briefly your institution's priorities and also kind of reacting to what the other speakers have touched? Resilience, how are you integrating resilience considerations into your own financing, Michelle?
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon to all the panel members and everybody. Firstly, a big thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this panel, and thank you on behalf of Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund to the CDRI for providing technical assistance to the whole of Ghana. It's much appreciated. So let me tell you a little bit about GIF. So GIF was started as a mandate of the Parliament in 2014, so we're 100% owned by government, but we also have an advisory board which allows us some independence to operate in both the public and the private sector. To date, we have a balance sheet of about $445 million, and our portfolio size is about $3.6 billion. So GIF supports Ghana's vision for climate resilience and low emissions infrastructure development, which is aligned with the Paris Agreement Article 21C. As it stands, GIF have been able to secure climate funding with AFD, the African Development Agency, of $85 million. Our priorities, as was asked, our priorities currently is to provide funding for resilient infrastructure in the country, both economically and socially. So our portfolio spans over quite a few different sectors. We have projects in hospitality, energy, telecommunications, housing, transport, which is both air and seaports. So we're not limited to any particular sector. We do have the objective to be able to expand. Additionally, in terms of our priorities, we're looking to set up a climate sub-fund, and we currently have FSD Africa who are assisting us to do that. We're also keen to look into some project preparation facilities, so if there's anyone out there that does have that and is looking for partners or investors, please do speak to myself. I also have my colleague, Mr. Jean, who is here, so we would be keen on connecting with our neighboring countries to see what facilities they do have available. Another one of our priorities is, as it stands, the government of Ghana have declared that they want to build a green city. So that's something that we're hoping that we could work with the government on to develop on. As GIF itself, we do insist that climate and sustainability analysis are done at the initial stages of our project analysis. So we've moved away from making it an afterthought, and it has now become a core requirement for any of our projects. So these are a few of the things that as GIF we're working towards. As I said, GIF have that mandate to get external funding, local funding, but our mandate does say that we should build infrastructure inside of Ghana. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. Greatly appreciate. I'm going to go to, Mr. Kanapara, you have to leave, it's okay. Thank you so much, thanks for joining. Looking forward to collaborating with you. I'm going to go to Martin. We've heard from senior officials from countries as well as from AIIB and OPEC Fund. Africa is rapidly urbanizing, lots of opportunities, but also lots of challenges, particularly in urban infrastructure, municipal services, water, sanitation, and so on. So particularly when it comes to integrating resilience considerations, if you can talk about what's been your experience and what are you doing in Europe in terms of innovation?
Yes, thank you very much. And coming at the end of a great panel, much of the insights have already been picked up, so I'll draw upon them and tell you what we're doing, especially around water resilience and water infrastructure. That's the area that I'm a specialist in. So I work for Arup. We're a consulting engineering company, HQ'd in the UK, but we have 95 offices globally. And much of our work is in this international space in terms of resilient infrastructure. So we've developed a number of tools because we're owned by our staff, which allows us to invest in new thinking and new methodologies. And one of those tools that we developed some 10 years ago was the city water resilience approach. And that was based on what we saw around the globe in terms of investment into water infrastructure. And we were seeing that perhaps those investment choices weren't the best ones at that time, and resilience wasn't really being taken into account fully. So together with the World Bank, the Rocker Foundation, OECD, many others, we developed this approach called the City Water Resilience Approach. And we deployed it something like 25 different catchments and cities across the globe, many of them in Africa. So what do we do fundamentally? We like to, first of all, just understand and define the resilience question in a particular city or country. So what does that mean? Looking at not just the climate impacts, but thinking about it in a holistic way. So we understand that water is a system, but it's actually part of a system of systems. So we need to understand how water interacts with, say, food, energy, with transport, and with health. So once we start to unpack those things, we can start to think about a resilience solution. So our first step forward, before we design anything, where ultimately we're designers of engineering infrastructure, is to understand. And we do that together with the city or the country that we're working in. So we're bringing all that information together to actually understand not just one engineering solution. We think about a portfolio in interventions, certainly in the water space. And we try to understand how they will operate not just for today, not just in 10 years, but in 50, 60, 80 years' time. And Africa is in that unique situation where, as we've already heard, that 70% of the infrastructure requirements hasn't yet been built for out to 2050. So we're able to think about the investment into that infrastructure as being fully resilient and sustainable. So perhaps learning from decades or hundreds of years of investment into infrastructure and thinking about what are the requirements uniquely for Africa. So we've worked in Cape Town, we've worked in Kigali, we've worked in a number of secondary cities, and we're currently working in Lagos to understand what the sustainable and resilient infrastructure requirements will be. And the key to it is, from our perspective, but I think some of the insights that we've had from the panel, is actually getting the evidence to understand what it is. So providing decision makers with an evidence-based solution and adaptive pathways to infrastructure resilience. And that's twofold, not just for the decision makers and understanding what projects are required for water resilience, whether it be too much, too little, too polluted, but it's also to give confidence to the investment community. So by actually having that robust evidence solution basket, we're actually providing those decision makers and the investors in terms of those solutions. So we're working in Lagos now to step forward with the Lagos Water Partnership, which we identified that we needed to bring Lagos together, not just having ministries working in their silos, not just having corporations and industry and civil society operating in their silos. We brought that all together with Lagos in the so-called Lagos Water Partnership. That provides also that confidence then when we talk about investment into infrastructure, we have investors who are willing then to accept that evidence, help drive that evidence, and think about the project preparation from both the engineering point of view, but also from a financial point of view. So bringing that all together really is part of the function of the City Water Resilience approach. Everything we've done, we've published, we make it open source and accessible. So if you wish to learn more, please come and see me, or it's all online. All the learnings that we found across the 25 cities we've published. So it's also bringing peers together, cities to learn together, and actually build out resilient infrastructure into the future. And it's what Africa needs. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Martin. Greatly appreciate. Before people go away, I'm going to request Sakshi to give a couple of minutes, a quick overview on our Africa program. We've heard a lot from all of you. We are putting a new program particularly focused on infrastructure, so Sakshi, over to you. Sakshi is the lead portfolio specialist and she is the overall team leader coordinator for our Africa work. Sakshi.
Thank you, Ramesh. I think listening to all the panelists here, we are very glad that the program, how it is now being developed and designed, integrates almost all the things that have been said on stage today and during our interaction with many countries. The unique position that CDRI occupies means that we have engagement with governments bilaterally. We have regional organizations like ECOWAS. We are in discussions with more regional associations. Then a pan-continental organization like AUC, which means a larger vision for Africa. How do you embed resilience from the top down, going into the policies and the larger Agenda 2063, where resilience is inbuilt, is also recognized as the... So in the entire program, we realize that there is a place for risk assessments, there is a place for capacity, there is place for policy, regulatory reforms. But importantly, when you talk about infrastructure, the prominence has to be given to projects. And while these infrastructure projects are being developed, designed, conceptualized, or thought about, from the start, how do we get together some of these IFIs, DFIs, country organizations, AUC, to have a pipeline of projects of infrastructure, critical infrastructure projects, social infrastructure projects, and within that pipeline, look at design considerations, look at key measures that would increase resiliency of that project. For example, if a power project comes, how do we design the transmission and distribution lines? How do the civil structures have to be better designed, constructed to take the onslaught of the high wind speeds, for example. So it is really getting down to the bottom of the sector, deconstructing it, and then going into sector by sector. So that is really where we are now looking at more direct engagement and intensive engagement with the IFIs, which have a long project listing, and for them, like what Ajay was mentioning, bankability is huge point. Reputational risk is there in terms of when they are investing in such projects. So really, majority of the project, of the resources that the programs will be built, around 70 to 80% would be for this project preparation support for the pipeline projects that we agree with the country governments, with the banks that are there in Africa, with other organizations like GIF, for example. But what we say that these projects, then again, we run the risk of being coming in and going out from project to place. But the effort is to ensure that the ecosystem is developed, wherein the projects, we could only do a handful of projects at a time, but there are multiple projects that are good. But how do you ensure that an ecosystem is built, which means there are policy reforms, regulatory reforms are supported. In Ghana, for example, we are now helping them on their request to develop a resilient infrastructure strategy. Now these are some of the ecosystem reforms, capacity building, regulations, codes and standards. So how this infrastructure system is strengthened at the country level, at the regional level, at the continental level. So broadly speaking, within the limited amount of time we had, this is the overall structure of the project. So we hope and we really wish that in the next few months, we would have more detailed, intensive discussions with not only the country governments, but some of the funds on board, some of the banks that we've been talking to put this into practice and ensure that there is a greater uptake of the program across Africa. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Sakshi. Let me bring that to a close because it's cutting into lunchtime or whatever is left. And my sincere apologies, this room is like a sauna. This part of the pavilions or the pavilions in this area are kind of, AC is not working yet. So particularly appreciate your patience and all of you coming and sharing time. All of you who are here as well as the 3 colleagues who had to leave. Thank you so much. Good afternoon.